So here's what we want to talk about today. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a discussion around how the foundation funds technology support, and so that's how we take on projects directly within the foundation software development that we do with our own contractors and staff and such, and talk a little bit about the year that we've had in the development world. Alice will talk about projects that we've taken on in a larger scale, and I think I'll get into a little bit about how that's a somewhat new thing for the foundation, but Alice will talk about the details of those projects that we've done. Joe will talk about GSOC and the individual point projects that we've been funding. I'll talk a little bit about the year ahead, but I think as we've alluded to in a few venues here, this is definitely something that we are mapping out and are very interested in feedback and collaboration and input from people in this room, from the core team, from Source Manager, and so we'll talk a little bit about that and have some opportunity for questions and discussion. One of the things I would like to do in this venue is have it, I don't want it to be me lecturing for 20 minutes and then Alice lecturing for 20 minutes. So I think there is definitely going to be some conversational aspect to it. And so if there are things where it's sensible to go off on a short tangent, we can do that. Or if Joe's talking about some technology projects that we're funding and there's interest in the audience in a bit of a deeper dive on specific things, or we want to go and discuss them a little bit more, we can definitely do that as well. So starting off, I think there's probably not within this room too much, but there has been confusion around what the foundation spends money on and what its role and purpose is. And I want to say that I think this is the mission statement on the top line here. This is what the foundation is supposed to do, and there hasn't always been a realization that one of the things that includes very much so is direct software development and hardware support. And so I have a couple of snippets here from commit history. The earliest evidence I could find in our source history. So from 2002, we acquired a DVD burner to bring up support, and I think the first evidence of a sponsored development project that I can find where we were funding software development directly was Sam Leffler working on some network stack locking improvements, and both of these are before my time in the FreeBSD Foundation, but I think this is just a suggestion that it has been the foundation's mission basically to fund direct hardware and software support for quite some time. So, I mean, basically, yeah, in the early 2000s, most of our effort was individual project grants that typically developers would come and propose and say, I'm looking to do this, I've got time available, I'm in between jobs or something, and there's something I want to contribute to FreeBSD, and bring a proposal and get that funded, or individual hardware points. And then I think it's sort of probably 2010 and a little bit thereafter, we started moving into larger scale projects, and probably the first big example of that would be the ARM64 project, where the porting effort, where Andy Turner was doing a bunch of that work in the community. There was some corporate interest in FreeBSD on ARM64, and ARM and Cavium, a hardware vendor, was interested in FreeBSD on the platform. And there were a few different efforts going on, but there was an understanding and realization that it really needed to be a community effort, and it needed to be sort of, instead of just a number of different people kind of working on the same thing, the foundation had a role to play in bringing it all together. And so we ended up essentially coordinating a bunch of different efforts that were going on, and we ended up, we contracted Andy directly and worked with a contract house to do some additional work, but we brought all of the parties together to get a larger project going. And I think that where we are today, with the foundation's budget increasing and with the complexity of things that need to get done increasing, we've taken on a number of larger projects like that. And so Alice will talk a little bit about some of those that are that we have underway in a moment. But we also very much want to continue to support individual impactful project grants. So where there are things that are important to FreeBSD that aren't happening in the community, that's something else that we very much want to continue. And I will say that generally speaking, the kinds of projects that we want to take on are things that are not naturally happening by either corporate users or in academia, or the community is not able to accomplish sort of absent a specific effort. So there are many things that are happening in FreeBSD that are very, very well supported by corporate developers, sponsored developers within companies and things like that. But there are also other areas, so things like there are some toolchain components where everyone kind of wants it to be there and wants support, but it's not really on anyone's critical path to say, this is something that I'm willing to carry the entire cost of making sure that this works. So that's a place where the foundation often has a role to play. So just a little bit about us. So the three of us, Joe, Alice, and myself, make up the team that sort of manages the technology projects that we have within the foundation. But I have here a slide of everyone who is working with or for the foundation in some technical capacity at the moment. And so some people on here are effectively full-time employees of the foundation. Some people are contractors. Some are contractors working on individual specific projects. And some are basically subject matter experts that we have a contract framework in place for. And so if there is something we need a bit of dedicated time on, we have the framework already exists to be able to have that person do some work for the foundation, but they may not be doing that on a very active and regular basis. But for the most part, people on this list are, I would say people on here are, generally speaking, at least half of their time, most of them, is going into a development effort. Maybe 2/3, something like that, or 3/4 of the people on this list are in that kind of domain. So a little bit about what we've done over the last year. Like I said, the team has grown very significantly. So we have a substantial and sustained increase in the amount of effort that we are able to lend directly to development efforts. And along with that, we have the specific larger scope projects that Alice will get into. But we also continue with general support for ARM64 and AMD64 low-level things, and we've continued funding more individual project grants now. And I think Joe can Joe will get into a number of these a little bit later on. But I think like the CIS benchmark is something that we recently that we did over the last year. There was this is a set of security standards and configuration options and things like that for a secured FreeBSD installation. It had been done for FreeBSD 4 point something, something like 15 or so years ago, and had not been updated, and basically had sort of aged out and was not relevant. So we funded an effort to produce an up-to-date version, and that has, for people in certain industries, that is very important. That it's a requirement for deploying any operating system in certain industries. OCI containerization is something that is not a direct project of the foundation. That effort has been essentially spearheaded by Doug Rabson as a volunteer effort, but we've lent support in terms of helping to organize meetings and track issues and sort of just provide ancillary support to make sure that it can happen. One of the things that we did over the last year was our initial interaction with Alpha Omega that's been referred to a little bit earlier, but Alpha Omega funded a code audit of Beehive and Capsicum, which are two high priority subsystems within FreeBSD from a security perspective. So we basically looked at, what are the things we could usefully target in a code audit in FreeBSD that would have high value and have good results in having a targeted review by an offensive security firm. And so I think let's see here. So there's a link to the report, I think, which has both the audit report that Synactive produced for us, and then as well a comprehensive report that the foundation produced that interpreted the results, talks about how we address the specific vulnerabilities that were reported to us, and then also what the next steps are to try and make this a sustainable and durable improvement to our process. But here we have a list of the specific security advisories that came out of that effort. Some of these are more or less important. The second one on the list there, the Umutex use after free, is a pretty serious issue that had actually been discovered outside of this effort prior to our. I think it had been discovered several years ago, and it was known in certain circles, but was very good for us to fund and discover it and fix it, and then a number of people published a write-up, or different people published write-ups on the flaw after the fact. So this is a really important one, specific issue that got fixed as a result of this. And then finally, we also fund hardware on a relatively ongoing basis. So this is the most recent effort the most recent hardware purchase. I think it's a total of 13 different servers that are going into the NYI Chicago site. So NYI New York Internet has a colo in Chicago. The colo that they own, the colo that hosts most of our equipment used to be NYI's site in New York, except it was actually in New Jersey. But that was sold to they sold that site to another. They sold that site to another colo company who is now a sponsor for the project and is hosting that equipment for us. But we want to. The project has desired to stand up the Chicago site, and so now we have a bunch of hardware that is going to be installed there. And then the laptop support and usability project, I think, is one I wanted to highlight specifically because I think this is something that has started to have demonstrable results, and I think it's. People sort of say, why are we doing this? FreeBSD is a server OS. Why invest in the laptop effort? But I think the real reason that it's important to me. I use FreeBSD on my desktop, on my laptop as a daily driver. I think many of us do here. We have people have commented in the past that. There were lots of Apple logos at developer summits. I mean, if I look out in the audience now, I still see a number of Apple logos, but I see lots of framework laptops in the audience as well. And I think the key reason that we want to invest in this is so that FreeBSD is a viable platform for software developers to use as their day-to-day environment. So it's the developers themselves that we want to have a compelling platform for, and it's the next generation of systems programmers. We want to be able to make sure that if someone is interested in learning about and developing as a systems programmer, they can do it on FreeBSD. And a high-level view of sort of where the money is going. So we have, or where it went rather over the last year. So a number of laptop projects are pretty significant. Pretty significant efforts, and then the STA projects that Alice will talk about in just a moment. So I think with that, I will hand it on to Alice.
Oh, is this the thing?
Yeah, that's the forward backwards.
Is the mic on? Okay, cool. Hey everyone, I'm going to tell you a bit about the direct funded projects. All right. So over the last year or so, the foundation has expanded the source of funding that it gets to include funding that's linked to specific outcomes. So rather than having donations, which go into a pot and then can be used for whatever the foundation chooses, these investments are very much tied to specific work and have come from usually just one source of funding. So you can see here that we've got 3 specific funding sources in 2024-25. Notably, we've got Quantum Leap Research, and they've given $250,000 towards the laptop project. The foundation has also put a large sum towards that, around $500,000, probably more by now, or probably will be more by the time we finish. The Sovereign Tech Agency, previously known as the Sovereign Tech Fund, a group based out of Germany, German government, they gave us actually a euro amount, but it's roughly $745,000. And then Alpha Omega, who funded a couple of projects, including all-around security, including the code audit and a process audit. And I should really give a shout out to Greg, who's sitting right at the back there, who was very instrumental in helping get the funds in. All right. So I'm just going to talk about 2 of the projects today because it's a lot of money that's gone into these projects, and as you can imagine, a lot of money can buy a lot of work, and it's difficult to fit. I don't think I'd have time to tell you everything that you might like to know about these projects, so I'm going to focus on the 2 bigger projects. We've got, on the left-hand side, what we sort of tend to refer to as the laptop project, but it's laptop support and usability improvements. Then on the right-hand side, we've got, internally we call it STA, because that's the name of the sponsor, but externally we call it infrastructure modernization and tech debt. So the left-hand side one is the laptop one, and the right is the tech debt and infrastructure modernization. They're both similarly sized projects of around $750,000. As you can see on the left-hand side, Quantum Leap Research is a private company. They have actually recently updated their website, so it says a bit more on it than it used to, but it's kind of government military stuff. They want to use FreeBSD as a laptop operating system, and they had specific functionality that they wanted to be able to use. So they got in touch with us and asked us if we could help focus the development or move forward some development on that. And as you can see, I will share a bit more details on the scope in a minute, but we've got contemporary Wi-Fi, audio, modern suspend and resume, and other features. This project started just before the beginning of 2025 and will run for more than a year, probably about a year and a half, depends how long the money lasts. Sovereign Tech Agency is when we got the funding, it was part of the German government. It's now spun out into being its own entity. But its focus is actually really different to quantum leap research. So they have commissioned a package of work around modernising the infrastructure for FreeBSD, CI/CD builds, zero trust builds, and things like that. Also some tech debt. We're not doing the work for them. We're doing the work to improve the diversity and security and efficiency of a very key part of the open source ecosystem, that being FreeBSD. So in terms of diversity, FreeBSD helps to provide more operating system diversity in the digital ecosystem. So we are a good candidate for them to invest in. So let me just tell you a bit about the infrastructure modernization project. There are 5 work packages. So I'm going to show you all of them. They're labeled, or they're named A through E. And what I wanted to get across to you in these slides is I'm not going to read them all through, but I wanted you to have a chance to look at the scope and also to see what we've done on that, how far we've got through delivering that scope. So work package A, that was the one we started first. We started August last year, and that will run all the way through to the end of this year, but nearly all the work was done in the beginning, so it's just down to a small amount sort of every month now. So as you can see, technical debt, on the left-hand side, this is what was in the contract with the Sovereign Tech Agency. On the right-hand side, the scope that we co-created. So all of these work packages have got very, very high-level, lightweight contractual obligation, but actually gives us the chance to have co-ownership as the foundation with the FreeBSD project to deliver things that the project already wanted. So as you can see, we've got a bug characterization dashboard. We delivered that with an open source tool called Grimoire Lab. We got that hosted on FreeBSD. It's never been hosted on FreeBSD, and we've upstreamed the instructions on how to do that for other projects to use. We've also funded some Bugzilla upgrades and a few other things that you can see there. The green ticks means it's done. And the yellow circles means it's still in progress, because I couldn't find an icon that indicates still in progress. All right, work package B, zero trust builds. That started in January, so obviously we have not been working on this one quite as long. I guess most people have an idea of what zero trust builds means, but we had a fairly lightweight scope, sort of contractually. And then you can also see we've got essentially a prioritised list of deliverables there, or requirements. And that we ran a process to engage with core source manager and sec team to come up with these requirements. We didn't dictate them ourselves. So you can see that the ones that are in the must category are the ones that we really feel we must deliver. And then should and could, decreasing priority. And we are part way through. Work package C also started in January and is improving CI/CD automation. We do have a couple of items completed on this one and a few more that are in progress. So that one's moving along nicely. And these slides will be available if you want to take a look at them. Ports and packages security. You can see that this is a lot about the vulnerability database and putting it into a new format, migrating the data, and then rolling that up into an SBOM on demand. And so that one actually, I'll just go back, that one started in April, so we've literally just brought on a contractor to help with that, and we're about a month in, 6 weeks. Similarly with Work Package E, but this one's all about SPOMs, whereas the other one was only a little bit about SPOMs. So at the moment, we are just working on evaluating exactly what we want to get from the SPOM, and with all of these, the scope was co-created to make sure that we would be delivering things that would be useful. Okay. So obviously that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. It would be great to give you places to go to find out more. There are some links here to the initial project announcements if you want to know more about Sovereign Tech Agency, why we're doing this, etc. That's the one to look at. Then as key bits get finished, then we're sort of announcing, this thing's completed. So, for example, we've got one for the Grimoire Lab going live. There's a blog and so on for that. And there's a podcast as well, actually. You can listen to the podcast. Then there's the quarterly updates, the FreeBSD updates that you can look at, which always contain information. Okay, so laptop support and usability, not as many slides for this one, but just as much work. Just a chunkier, development. So I think Ed had alluded to some of this. We've got Wi-Fi, which it was, everybody's top thing that they wanted to be able to do on laptops. Then we've got the graphics, which was mainly based around porting from Linux graphics drivers. And I think we've just got 6.7 and 6.8 merged now, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Audio, there's a few things for that. We were talking about package base and the installer earlier, so there's some work that we're targeting for 15.0 for that. Hibernation and suspend and resume. And then we've got a few other bits related to hardware and that sort of thing. All right, so how are we getting on with this? Pretty well. If you can get your binoculars out, you'll be able to see, hopefully read what we've got here. In January, we got a couple of things done, some technical debt, and a lot of other things started. Then we got a tool to transition systems to using package base, and a bunch of things went into review. Then you can see that in March we've got Wi-Fi 4 and 5, and Mark, technical storyteller, has done some nice videos about the Wi-Fi updates. In April, we got an additional Wi-Fi driver, the installer to include package base, a bit of security work, and then this month, last month, we've got some more installer updates. And you can also see there's a long pipeline of other things coming through, which will be landing, as the months go along. If you look at the QR code at the top, that'll take you to the repo where everything's being tracked. If you want to read more about each of the months, that is, there's a report for each month at that link. And also in that repo, you'll find roadmaps. So we got a roadmap for Q1, a roadmap for Q2. That is, the roadmaps cover more than one quarter, but they're updated quarterly. And you'll also find more links and stuff like that. How are we doing for time? All right. Yeah. So where you can find out more, we've got the project board. So the project board on GitHub is we're not doing source control on GitHub, we're just using it for project management. So there's issues on there, but you won't find code commits. The monthly reports that I just mentioned. We also have a laptop and desktop working group, which is a monthly call hosted by Chris Moores. And you can join that, there's details on the wiki. There's a desktop mailing list, you probably already know about it, but we also send updates there. And again, quarterly updates and summits and such like. I'm just waiting for people to take pictures. Got it. Cool. Are we doing? No, we're not doing questions.
Yeah, but we can if we
No,
want.
it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I just reiterate what Ed said. I would much prefer to have like more of a conversation than just talking to people. So if you want to jump in anytime.
You can use this.
So I thought, as with the past Dev Summits, I'd start with a higher level kind of view of the impact. I was kind of considering whether it was worth putting these kind of commit stats into the talk again this year. But I thought it would be valuable just so we can see how things have changed over time. And I'll also mention the usual caveat that commit data, it's a crude way of kind of summarizing development work, but it's very simple. Like I can, put a picture or two up and it gives you a rough idea. So I just wanted to mention that it's not a perfect picture. So the donut plot on the left is a breakdown of the sponsored commits over the last 12 months. And with respect to the foundation, not much has changed. We're still around a third of the sponsored commits. Some other things have changed. So some of the other top sponsors have kind of shuffled around. I think Brooks and John and some other people have been active with, I think that's the sponsors, the Air Force Research Lab and DARPA. Netflix is still up at the top. And what can we take home from this plot, I think, is that sponsorship is healthy in that there's a diversity of sponsors, like in the past. The plot on the right might tell a bit of a different story. It's a breakdown over calendar years of the proportion or the percentage of commits that have been sponsored, of all the commits to the source tree that have been sponsored by the foundation. And it almost tells the opposite story in that we've seen a big jump in this year so far in sponsored commits from the foundation. We're starting to approach a quarter of all commits to the source tree are sponsored by the foundation. And so Ed wanted me to be sure to talk about, this could be considered a good thing. I mean, we're the entity whose sole purpose is to make FreeBSD better, but do we really want one entity contributing so much? I think I'd be more concerned if it was like 30, 40, or 50%, but it's something to keep an eye on.
I think the other thing I would point out on this graph, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned diversity of sponsors, but I think there's also an interesting diversity of type of sponsor, or like the class of sponsors. So ARM and Chelseo are both upstream vendors who sell essentially vendors who sell products on which FreeBSD can run, or that you can use with FreeBSD. Netflix, Netgate, companies building products on or using FreeBSD in their product. The DARPA work as sort of the academic and research community, and Clara as a consultancy doing work for, generally speaking, doing work either for others or their own internal use for FreeBSD. So I think that is a pretty healthy and good mix, that it's a variety of different people bringing things to FreeBSD for their own reasons and a variety of different reasons.
And on that note, inside this chunk, there's also a lot of good diversity, from people like Colin, who has his own companies, to lots of diversity in that chunk. Americ, you had a question.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see also the absolute numbers for this. Is the total amount of commits staying pretty constant and the percentage going up, or is the percentage going up as also other companies are committing in absolutely the same amount?
So I can share it's just a simple shell script that I use to generate this. I can share that. I can say a couple things. I'm not sure if I'm going to exactly answer your address your concern here, but I was going to say a little bit about why I think this is happening, this spike in 2025 so far. And first is the obvious reason is that we have more funding. So we have more developers, so there's more sponsorship from the FreeBSD Foundation. But the other thing is a trend that I've mentioned in the past. It's work in the source tree. The proportion of work in the source tree that's sponsored is going up and up. And in fact, this year so far, we've just crossed the 50% threshold. So more than half of the commits going into the source tree are sponsored, which is, I'm not sure what to say about it, but it's definitely kind of a big deal, I think. But I will share that script with you. Any other questions? Yeah. Yep. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing. Here, I'll bring you mine. I'll just walk up.
Thanks. So my question is, what changed in 2025 from 2024 and 2023? How did you get more funding? What did you guys do differently?
So Greg over here was working for the foundation, and he got a couple big grants. So the stuff that Alice talked about, we got funding from Alpha Omega, we got funding from the Sovereign Tech Agency, and we got funding from Quantum Leap Research.
And I will say that all of the work that we're doing under the STA investment and the Alpha Omega grants and QLR's sponsorship, that is all, it's all work that was somewhere on our to-do list or somewhere on our agenda. Maybe it wasn't something that we had expected to start this year, absent specific funding showing up for it. So it's all things that we wanted to do or related to what has been on a list of good things to do for the project for a long time. So I think it's sort of the fact that these companies or organizations or agencies had funding and had money available with a mission that overlaps with things we wanted to do, basically was just a good confluence to allow this to happen.
Yeah, so for example, we've been sponsoring work on Wi-Fi for a number of years. It's just organization, things change, you get more money. You can hire people like Alice to organize and manage the projects, stuff like that. Okay, so as with past Dev Summits, I say a sentence or two about what everybody's been up to. I think a lot of the people here know a lot of the people on this slide, but there might be some people here that are some faces that are unfamiliar. So let's see how this goes. It's hard to keep track with so many people, but that's a nice problem to have. But I'll do my best here. So Konstantin's been with us for a long time. If you follow source development, you certainly see at least Konstantin's work go by. He's a senior kernel developer. He's an expert in x86 operations. The last big project he did with us was to implement an AMD IOMMU driver. Olivier has been working with us for a number of years. I just had a conversation with Olivier last night to remind me of all the good stuff that he's been doing. So the big one that comes to mind is like allowing unprivileged users to modify process credentials. So some tools like MacDo, and he's going to be giving a talk on that. So if you want to know more about that, go to Olivier's talk. What else? I know you fixed the freezing issue in AMD GPUs. So if you have an AMD-based system and your system's not freezing up because of the graphics, kernel module, you can thank Olivier. You also have been working on the CPU scheduler, so we have these heterogeneous cores now, and Olivier is going to work on the CPU scheduler to support them. Move on to Tom maybe. So Tom has been doing some networking stuff, some wireless stuff. He's working on USB debugging. He's worked on a couple of journal articles that sound really interesting. They'll be coming out soon. I won't spoil and say what they're about. Li Wen, I know a big chunk of Li Wen's time goes to CI stuff. He does a lot of mentoring. He's serving on core. He's very busy. Christos has been doing a lot of audio work, and he's also giving a talk here, so I will refer you to his talk. I'll say more about what Bjorn and Isaac have been up to in a moment. Shiva was I'm told, one of the first co-op students with the foundation, and now he's back to do bug busting, and I learned that you might also be looking at the unprivileged builds in the ports tree, something to do with that. Mitchell was here last year to talk about his work. He's basically interested in RISC-V stuff. He works on tools. He's been doing a lot of editing on man pages in the last few months. Pierre's been with us for a number of years. I know Pierre did some security stuff with Alpha Omega, like that security audit. You were heavily involved with that, right? I know you just got a commit bit, so so he'll be free to do lots more now. Philip is his mentor. You did a lot of work on that an optional graphical installer, some port stuff. And I'm sure there's lots that I'm forgetting. I'll say more about Harold in a minute. Americ's been working on modern suspend, and you're also giving a talk here, right? So I won't say anything more. Moin does a whole lot of different stuff. He helps with CI. He was on port manager. He helps with cluster admin. I think he manages Fabricator. He was doing stuff with the wiki. For Moin, I often recognize Moin's work when I'm searching through the ports tree and I want to find or determine if some software has been ported. And quite frequently I find, oh, it's already in the ports tree and it was put there by Moin. Kalina started with us recently to do some CI work. So if I understand correctly, we want to basically take a pull request and spawn jobs off in the cloud. I think she's looking at Nuage init to do that, like BAP's tool, Nuage init. Mark Linneman is doing a little bit of bug triage for us. He's been doing that for a while, but now he's doing it with some sponsorship. Sai, I think I emailed Sai a couple of months ago because we heard from some users that, so this has been an ongoing conversation. I remember there was a post or a thread on developers debating whether or not we should migrate from Heimdall Kerberos to MIT Kerberos, and it was a very long thread, and there's lots of arguments back and forth, but that was like 2017, and since then, I think a lot of the arguments have, the case for a lot of those arguments have grown. So if I remember from the conversation with Sai, he was maintaining Heimdall, and there was some major upgrade from 1 point something to 7 point something, and it was a lot of work, and he got it done. And then there was a security point release, and he realized just for this point release, there was a whole lot more work, and that's when he decided, yeah, maybe it's time to take a closer look at slowly migrating to MIT Kerberos, and so that's what he's doing right now. I saw a flood of reviews come in just today, so progress is being made there. Shaggy is interning with the foundation, and he is giving a talk on ABI stability here at the conference, so I'll refer you to that. Tuka, so Tuka Tuukka gave me a lesson on how to pronounce his name, and I'm sure I'm not doing it well. He's Finnish, so there's a long, like, Tuukka. He is working on SBOM stuff, so software bill of materials. So it's basically, if I understand correctly, a big inventory of all the components that make up a software system, like FreeBSD. I think he's also looking at integrating OSV, so basically an alternative to Vue XML into package. Alfonso has been doing vision accessibility work with us. He gave a talk at EuroBSDCon in Dublin about his work. I think he just recently shared an outline or a table of contents for a vision accessibility handbook that he's nearing completion. Jean-Sébastien, he's been doing that graphics work, and Alice mentioned that work to port DRM kernel module from Linux was just merged, and that's in the DRM KMod repository under the FreeBSD GitHub account. It's not yet in the port tree, but that should come soon.
And so that gets us to 6.8, and then work for 6.9, 10, 11, 12 will follow, and then once we get there, there'll be more work for later, but 6.12 is a LTS release, so that'll be a good, getting to 6.12 will be a good place to sync up for a while.
Yeah, so we got 6.7 and 6.8 at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that happened. I think I have separate slides for Haizam and Roman. Ivan is a volunteer intern for the summer. He's working, are we good for time? Yeah. Ivan's a volunteer intern. He's working with Gleb Popov. So Gleb is interested in desktop things, and a lot of these modern desktops like KDE and GNOME require these dbus daemons. And so Ivan is going to work with Gleb to implement a lot of the ones missing for FreeBSD. And then we have Mark on here. Mark used to be very active with the foundation. I think you're mostly, Mark's in high demand, so I think most of his time is going for Clara and Innovate UK. If I look, that's going by the commit logs, but he's officially available, and I don't know what gets billed or whatever, but I see lots of work for Mark that's really relevant to foundation work. Like, for example, the stuff for Psi, I saw that you were reviewing a lot of that for the Kerberos migration. Anything else I should say here?
I mean, yeah, he CC'd me on him, so.
Mark can't help himself but to help.
Mark does a lot of work whether he gets paid or not.
Yeah. Okay, do we want to, so one of the disadvantages of talking last on the last section of the summit is that I think a lot of this stuff has been talked about already, but maybe Wi-Fi is worth speaking about a little bit more about, because a whole lot of work has gone into this. So 14.3 is the first release that has, so I'll use specific terms here, Wi-Fi 5, so 802.11c. And from my perspective, so I have a Framework 16 that has a MediaTek card, but that's not quite supported yet, so I swapped in a AX210, I think it is, that is well supported, and it's worked, it's only been about a week, but it's worked phenomenally. This is a speed test that I did, so I'm getting consistently 300 megabits up and down. It's very reliable. I've seen 400 on occasions. The caveats are there's some issues with suspend resume, and you just have to have one of the few cards that are supported right now. And Bjorn claims that if you have the right AP that supports VHT 160, he's getting 850 megabits UDP. And so since this time last year, and so most of this work for Bjorn, I think, goes into the Linux KPI. And since last year, I counted about 200 commits from Bjorn, mostly from Bjorn, to the Linux KPI, Net 802.11, or Wi-Fi driver code. So other people that are doing Wi-Fi stuff is Adrian's is active again, and he updated the RTWN driver to 11AC. And Tom, so both of those used the Linux KPI shim. Tom tried something different. So there was a lot of debate whether using this Linux KPI for Wi-Fi drivers was a good approach. And I think some of the detractors might have had a point considering how hard it was to get here and how much time it took to get here. And so Tom took a different approach and imported a native driver, IWX, and that came from Future Crew, and Future Crew got it in there from OpenBSD. I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard, like, Tom still is working on it, but apparently people are getting pretty good speeds there too. So maybe you could describe wireless as, in 2023 it was arguably bad.
It was almost usable.
Almost usable. Last year it was not bad, and now this year I think it's pretty good. I mean, I'm curious to hear how's Wi-Fi worked for everybody here has anybody had problems other than the suspend resume issue? On a supported card running 14.3 or greater.
I've had the experience that it's working every other boot.
And what are you running?
Well, no, it's not this thing here. That'll be easier. It's a book a notebook I can bring down. I haven't been using it during the conference. It's up in my room.
So I'm not going to probably be able to help you. The best thing is to submit a bug report.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to that state yet, but you just asked.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
upgraded to 14.3 here, and it seems to grab the Wi-Fi every other boot.
Okay.
But also the Wi-Fi here is sometimes.
There's a problem
So,
here,
could
but I
be
don't
either.
think it's related to the Wi-Fi. I think if you look, this is my guess, you'll see that you're not getting an IP address because I think DHCP got bogged down.
Well, my other device is working fine now, and it's still every other boot.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
This laptop we're presenting from is a framework that we installed 14.3 on from scratch a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Just worked, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. We heard from, I think it was mostly enterprise users, that they really value OpenJDK, a well-supported OpenJDK on FreeBSD. So a lot of the applications in the enterprise space use Java. Some of the even mainstream applications like LibreOffice depend on Java. So we decided to fund someone. We fund people in the past, and people like Greg Lewis have been doing a lot of volunteer work, but you essentially have, like Greg had a repo with a giant difference from what was upstream. And so what we really wanted was more than just, get the next version working and then we'll move on. We wanted to establish a relationship with upstream, so eventually FreeBSD would be part of upstream. And so that involved things like code refactoring so that code could be accepted, fixing tests, that sort of stuff. And Harold's done a great job so far. So libvirt is a framework for managing virtual machines, and we felt it would be good to have better support in Beehive for libvirt. So we contracted Roman, and he's been very busy implementing missing features for Beehive, updating tests, fixing network configuration. And some of the stretch goals for this project is to enable snapshot and resume support and firewall abstraction to configure NAT. I think we've probably talked enough about package base. We know FreeBSD update is past its due date. And so Isaac wrote package basify, and the goal there is just to get more people. It's just an easy way to get a system that supports package base so more people can test. Hyzom. Yes. A package basify? Just search FreeBSD wiki package basify. There's a link on the package base wiki page.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? So Hyzom came to us with a proposal for a web GUI, like a Proxmox-like web GUI. It's been a couple months, but if I remember the conversation correctly, Hyzom basically said he has lots of customers and he would really like to have them use FreeBSD, but they have to be able to self-manage this, and learning FreeBSD was just too big of a barrier. And so he thought he would create this GUI. So if you're familiar with Proxmox, it's a similar idea. Jail management, ZFS integration, so you can do all the things ZFS does through a web GUI. Yeah. And then finally, maybe I'll say a few words about GSOC. Again, we talked about this yesterday, so I'm not sure how much I should repeat, but we've got, I think it was 12 or 13 projects this year, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I think it's 13. 12. It was more than we had since 2016, I believe. And usually in the last few years that I've been involved in GSOC, we get like 12, 13 applications. We got 64 this year. So it was a nice problem to be able to pick, from a bunch of different applicants for each project. Maybe I'll say a little bit about one or two of the projects here. So, and maybe I'll be a horrible person and call out some people here because I know some of the mentors are here. So I know we've had conversations about the future of Rust. I still remember Brooks' comment from last year, like it's gonna happen, it's inevitable. So it's nice to see a Rust project here. It was proposed by George Neville Neal, and Alan Summers is very interested in Rust in FreeBSD, so he volunteered to co-mentor. John is mentoring a project for VMM accelerator support for QEMU. So talking to Ed, I understand that VMM is basically the kernel part of Beehive, and this is going to replace like QEMU over VMM. Is that essentially it?
Well, the ability to have QEMU use Beehive, kind of like it uses KVM on Linux.
Okay.
So you use QEMU's device models instead of Beehive's device models.
So basically fast QEMU, is that another reasonable, succinct way to put it?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Robert and Alfonso are mentoring a full disk administration tool for FreeBSD. So if I remember conversations with Robert, Linux has these nice graphical tools where you can resize partitions and do all kinds of things that are just easy in a graphical interface, and that's missing from FreeBSD. So that's the project they're working on, or that's the project they proposed. Ed and I are mentoring QCOW2 compressed image support for Make Image. So Make Image can generate QCOW2 images, but it doesn't have the built-in compression, and so this student is going to add it. This is a really simple project, which I think we need more of. Basically, the sock stat output is just suboptimal, and Alan had some suggestions for improving it. Warner, do you want to say a word or two about your project?
Yeah, the project is to move ACPI into the bootloader. There's a number of things that we've wanted to do but couldn't because we couldn't evaluate ACPI objects, just the ACPI tables. And this will do that and additionally give us Lua bindings so that we can make it a little bit more scriptable if we need to.
Cool. And you can hold on to the mic because I'm going to probably ask Olivier to say a word or two about the project that he's mentoring.
Yes. So I'm mentoring a project about improvements of MacDo and MDo. I'm presenting a talk on these topics tomorrow morning. In fact, it's about control the credentials transition without set UID executables. So we have now, I would say, a stable foundation, but there are lots of nice to have or enablers that we would like to have in those components. So for example, logging why credential transitions are refused. This is for auditing or also for debugging for administrators. We'd like to support thin jails scenarios, so that entails a few changes because today the path of MDo is not really configurable, and some other improvements in MDo to transition to an explicit list of groups to support more scenarios. So and we have this student working on these topics.
Cool. So Colin, you have mentored projects to speed up the FreeBSD boot process in the past, at least 1 year in the past. 2? Just one before. Just one before. Is there anything you want to add about this one that's different or novel or like a sentence or two? Just maybe pause for 1 second. Here, I'll bring this microphone up.
It's a race.
This project is a little bit different from most GSOC projects in that most GSOC projects have a sort of clear goal you're heading towards. Here, the goal is, well, make stuff faster, but the first part of the project is sort of exploration. First we need to figure out what is slow, and then we need to figure out why is it slow before we can actually go to the last step, which is fixing it, making it faster. So this is a bit more of a research project and less of a here's something specific we want written project. But we're already making progress in identifying problems, so we should make things faster by the end.
Thank you. And Americ's here, and he's mentoring a Wi-Fi management UI. Do you want to say anything about it?
Sure, yeah. So I'm mainly co-mentoring this. Getz is the primary mentor on this, but it's going to be to have like a non-ncurses UI thing, and it's probably going to involve a lot of improvements to Netlink and touch on a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah.
Implementing journaling for FreeBSD ext3 and 4. I didn't even know. I think we support ext3.4 as a read-only file system. Is that right? Or
ext4 is read-only, 3 is read-write?
it is. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not sure either.
It is read-write. I mean, you wouldn't journal something that was read-only.
That's a fair point.
It is read-write.
Okay. And FreeBSD Power Profiling Tool, that sounds like it really works well with our laptop initiative. Is there anything you want to say about that one, Americ?
Yeah, that will be adding something like what exists on Linux with PowerTop. So you'll be able to see what processes are consuming how much power, and there'll probably be some historical monitoring of power usage for different processes. Yeah.
And then port FreeBSD to QEMU micro VM. So if I think Tom did some work on micro VM, and so micro VM, if I understand correctly, is kind of inspired or similar to Firecracker in that it's a machine type that's really simplified. Like it gets rid of PCI and HCPI. Gets rid of a lot of stuff, so you can have really small VMs that are short-lived. And Tom did, as I said, did some of this work, but it needs more work. And I think,
yeah, I mean, I think this pretty much brings us to an end of the kind of main content that we wanted to present. There's you know, some things that are on our coming up for us in the year ahead. In particular, we've recently have started another Alpha Omega engagement. What Michael was talking about this morning with the beach cleaning, we basically are going to look at around 100 or so pieces of software under Contrib and syscontrib and the other 5 or so directories that have Contrib software, and try to get some sense from those which ones are in good shape and which ones could use some help. The upstreams, if they're inactive or unmaintained, or trying to just even understand what all of the third-party software that we have is. So that's one major project that is getting underway now. And beyond that, we have ongoing work still in the STA and in the STA projects and in the laptop and desktop usability. And we'll continue with continue with our Tier 1 architecture support and individual point projects that come in. But I think one of the main themes is we really want to collaborate with core team and with source manager and really understand sort of what are the big things that we want to invest in, I think, and try to find the next project like the laptop project that maybe we can have as a path forward and see if we can find an unexpected source of industry funding to go along with that. And so I think to that point, I'd like to really open it up to kind of questions and discussion and get feedback if there is any in the room, but we'll also, you know, this will be an ongoing process with core and with source manager and port manager and docs.
Have you already identified certain companies or types of companies who might be interested in funding laptop improvements?
I don't think we have anyone at the moment who is not already funding it, who we would also try to work with. So we have QLR, who is interested in the long-term viability of FreeBSD on laptops. So I think there's a good opportunity for us to. It shouldn't be a one-time thing. I think they realize that this is going to be something that requires some sustained effort, and we may well come back with a proposal for additional work with them. And we've been collaborating quite closely with Framework. You know, they haven't been funding our development, but they have been very helpful in making hardware available, doing a bunch of development with their own internal developers, and really just kind of facilitating the ecosystem and answering questions and sort of helping move things along. So I think those are the two sources where we expect support to continue to come from. Dell has code contributions in flight that will go into the laptop effort. That should arrive soon. So a USB-C or a USB UVC webcam driver is in flight from Dell, and so I think, yeah,
I ask because, as you say, I mean, I don't think it should be a one-time thing because, I mean, it's cool that now we're sort of quote-unquote catching up. But, I mean, if QLR decides that we're caught up, there still needs to be a steady source of funding for laptop-related contributions.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't do us any good to sort of get to a spot where we say, okay, the Wi-Fi is pretty good, and laptop or and the graphics stack works really well on any sort of contemporary laptop you can buy, and we're done. And then we just leave it there, and then we wait 5 years, and then things are in poor state again. I mean, that certainly is not a viable path.
Yeah, I mean that funding isn't fully.
Wait.
So they provided a quarter of that funding, and so we also used internal investments as well as the Silicon Valley community grant that we received last year to help fund this too. So that was a separate grant that we didn't apply for.
To get FreeBSD running on the desktop or the laptop. Some examples that I can think of for like Linux is DaVinci Resolve is a big program that needs desktop working fine. Or Steam or Valve, they need the desktop working for their gaming. Do we have any kind of software that is commercially driving FreeBSD on the desktop that could potentially be a source of funding? Does anyone know of any?
I mean, it's a good question. I think QLR's interest in FreeBSD on the laptop is not just sort of altruistic, because I think it would be a good thing. Like, the long-term goal is to be able to have it as a viable platform for building a product or selling a service that uses FreeBSD as the desktop or the environment that's available. I think there are a number of examples that are unfortunately somewhat old at this point, and I think that have been migrated away, but of companies that used FreeBSD in a end-user desktop type environment. I think a number of those have migrated away from FreeBSD for reasons like outdated Wi-Fi support or outdated Linux or outdated graphics drivers. And so, I mean, I think whether or not those companies would come back to FreeBSD with that available, it's harder to say. And I think some of those I'm aware of a few examples of those sorts of things. They generally haven't been too interested in having that be publicly known. I think it would be very interesting to find other cases where companies have an interest in potentially doing that.
I can't think of any particular software, but I remember either Jonathan Looney directly saying it or hearing Ed say that he would like his developers at Netflix to be able to develop with a FreeBSD desktop. I think it's like a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Are these companies going to want some desktop-y application to run on FreeBSD if wireless and graphics isn't working well? So we have to get that working well, and then we might get some of these companies that want to target FreeBSD for some specific application.
I mean, I think the really key thing for having FreeBSD as a viable desktop and laptop environment is really just so that, like I mentioned earlier, that people in this community or people starting new to systems programming and going down that path, one or two of those people are going to do a startup sometime, and they're going to pick FreeBSD because it's what they're familiar with, or because they just the project they're working on grows into something and it carries on from there. I mean, the reason the reason I'm here and the reason I'm involved in FreeBSD is I was working for a company, and they needed to be able to handle large numbers of TCP sessions, and ePOL was an experimental feature that was under development in Linux, and KQ existed on FreeBSD, and so they ended up, it was in a release, KQ was already in a release, and so they ended up going with with KQ for their product, with FreeBSD and using KQ in their product, and that's how I ended up getting involved in FreeBSD, and sort of that's why I'm in front of the room here today, right? And so I think that's the sort of thing that, you know, if you can't use FreeBSD on your laptop, then you're not going to be using FreeBSD when you try and do something interesting and end up in a, you know, the little spark that ends up going and leading to something interesting from there.
Yeah, I agree with Joe about it being kind of a chicken and egg problem. I think, though, once we do get it into a state where the experience is generally great on desktop and laptop, it might invoke some companies to want to invest more. And we've seen this in Linux desktop, especially with Valve pouring money into them to get the graphics stack and the audio stack, basically beneficial to the entire system. So it's just, I guess, something to look into to get the ball rolling, and then, you know, that fuels more people to come on because more money's being put into progressing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then graphics and the wireless, I think Benedict was next. Graphics and the wireless are kind of like the foundation, no pun intended, and then they can build off of that once we have wireless and graphics, I think.
So I'd like to touch on, so I mean, this is great work by all means. I'd like to touch on something that was mentioned during the round robin. And that was basically something smaller, like thesis work with professors that are doing like master thesis, which typically goes like over 6 months or so. So I did something like that recently over the winter term with a student of mine. And yes, we're presenting that on Saturday, shameless self-advertisement. And so that is kind of a GSOC light in certain ways because the students don't get paid, but they need to do some kind of thesis over the time that they are at the university to finish their studies. And maybe we can find something there to give them some kind of mid-sized project that they can do over the course of the thesis to do some contributions to the project, and through that get contributors also, not just via GSOC. I mean, GSOC is a great way to get more people involved, but maybe we could do also something over the winter term that is a bit more light in the load, because we have individuals from the university that are taking care of supervising the students, and also maybe someone from the projects that would provide some technical background that maybe the academic people wouldn't so much be able to. Is that something that is of interest maybe? I know maybe Sato-san, have you something like this? Or similar? Or could be? Okay. Yeah, just a thought.
Americ.
Yeah, my question was, I noticed Bluetooth was absent in the slides.
What was absent?
Bluetooth. Is that something that the foundation is looking into, or is that going to be like a down the line kind of thing?
So, do you want to take that? I have maybe some things I could say about it, but not very much. So I know Christos looked at, so Christos is doing audio stuff, and he looked at Bluetooth audio a little bit, but we kind of put that on the back burner for a while. It's definitely something that's come up, but I can't really say much more. I don't know if anybody else has anything else.
Yeah, it was on a slide, but no, it wasn't prominent. But it's in the roadmap for the laptop project, and we've had input that it's sort of like a bit of a table stakes for a laptop to be able to connect Bluetooth headphones or peripherals, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's on the list, but it hasn't been started yet.
I had an email exchange with Bjorn recently. Apparently the Bluetooth that's on the AX210, somebody, I forget who now. Anyway, there's some sort of support for that. So there is some kind of spotty support. I've never used it myself, so I can't say much, but it definitely needs more work, and it's good to hear it's on the roadmap.
So, Benedict, I want to address your question or feedback. So we have been providing like stipends and hiring interns over the years. So Lee Wen Actually, he looks at me, he has students that sometimes they'll intern for us. So either they go through his university, and many of them may be unpaid, but he's been really good at bringing students into the project. I think Mihai from the University of Bucharest, I don't think that's the technical university. We've actually provided some stipends to those students on Beehive a few years ago. We also work with University of Waterloo, or we participate in their co-op program. So that's actually how we got Shiva. He was our first intern, and had a few over the years. And
I've been actually doing a co-op through the University of Ottawa, one of the people that was on the slide.
And I think we have one more in the Netherlands through Haruki.
That's in the UK, I believe. Dr. Honda in the UK is working with a student. I forget the details of the project, but because it's all Haruki and Dr. Honda are the evaluators.
Yeah, so we don't have a formal program, but I mean, we're really open to, say, if you have a student, and then you come to us and talk to us about that.
So just one thing to mention, we do have some stuff on the website about submitting a proposal. If you're thinking about submitting a proposal, feel free to talk to Ed and me, and we can sort of just give you a heads up if it's something that's plausible, or maybe we can help you kind of redirect you.
All right, thank you.